Hey folks, welcome back to Real Estate Investing Unmasked. Today we're going to talk about a job that I just had done at one of the properties that I manage. Now, in the front yard there's a clean out. And in the clean out, whenever the tenant was doing laundry, it would just put out a mountain full of water. And that's just gross. That gray water. Ugh. So what we had to do is we had to repipe the whole thing, all the way from where the clean out was, all the way to the sewer. As it turned out, there was clay pipe. Back in the 60s and 70s when they built this place, they had clay pipe underground, and it was starting to collapse. Now it was starting to collapse under where the road is. So we had a good 20-foot stretch between where the house is and where the street is. However, while that part was starting to crumble, it wasn't as bad as what was under the street for some reason. Now the root system of a tree close by had broken into the clay, and when I first had somebody go out there, they jet streamed the pipe, which means they have this head, this little head, that has all these little water jets that come off of it. And it shoots forward and out and just cuts, and it spins as it's going down, and it kind of cuts away the roots that are on the inside, but it also wears down the pipe on the inside. We did that twice. And what we did is, while we were the owner had opted to save the rent money over the course of about a year and use that rent money to pay for the repipe. The first estimates we got from the person who did the jet setting, the jet streaming, whatever it's called, they went in there and they said it would be $14,000 to fix the problem. That's a lot of money. He said that if he had to break up the street, it would be a minimum $20,000. So I thought, okay, well, it's going to be an expensive project. It really didn't matter as far as me having to call up a bunch of people yet to get estimates, because the reality is it was going to be a lot of money. So when I talked to the owner, he said, you know what, go ahead and save up the money over about a year, and we'll see what happens from there. So we did. We saved up for about 10, 11 months or so. During that time, we had to get it jet streamed or whatever, hydrojetted a couple times between the first time and we had it the first time and then another time. And then the tenant was telling me, hey, it's starting to back up again, and I know that you're saving up to do this thing, but we really would like to have this done. So for Christmas, I went and called up the owner and I said, look, we have enough money saved up now. Let's go ahead and get this thing repiped. And he suggested that I call 6 people, get 6 estimates for this. And I called up a lot of people. Now, I did not go with the cheapest estimate. I did not go with the most expensive estimate. I actually went with the estimate where it sounded like the professional knew that he was doing more than all the others. Also, the lowest guy I got, believe it or not, went from $14,000 at the top to about $4,500 at the bottom. Huge range, right? So one guy said, oh, we'll just take care of it. What you're going to do, what's in the yard, we'll go from the house to the street, and then we'll be done. Everything will be good. The next guy that was about $5,200 or so, he says, you know, we'll do from the house to some of it under the street, but we're not going to dig up the street. We're just going to go a certain way, and then we're going to be done. We're not going to need permits. We're not going to do permits. Everything will be okay. The third guy, the guy that I went with, was about $7,200 if I remember right. And it was from the clean out to the main head. And what he did was he said, we're going to replace all the pipe that is from the house to the street. And then from the street to the main head, we're actually going to shove in a tube, if you will, and squeeze in some epoxy. And basically build a whole new pipe underground. Now this piping system, the way he described it to me, this is all what he described to me as I understand it. What he would shoot in this little tube, and on the outside of the tube he would have this epoxy that he would squeeze in, and it would put in, basically create a new pipe. Not a thin layer. Lining the pipe on the inside creates like a micron level, very small liner. He was talking actually creating a new pipe, essentially, with this epoxy. So he shoved in this tube. Once he cut the clay out the street, he's able to shove in this tube, squeeze in the epoxy, get it to all the places where it's supposed to be, close off the end so that it doesn't go draining the epoxy straight into the sewer. It closes off the end, and he squeezes this epoxy around, dries it up for, I don't remember how long he said, like 30 minutes or 45 minutes or something like that. Anyway, dried it all up, and essentially had a brand new pipe. Once he had the brand new pipe in there, then he attached the piping itself, the new pipe, from the house to the street, and we had a brand new, nice clean pipe for $7,200. Now, why did I go with him? He got permits. That was a huge, huge part to this, was that the cheaper two people weren't going to do the full job, wanted to stop at the street or at least go a little bit into the street, and they weren't willing to pay for permits. They didn't want to get permits for this project. I said, that's insane. If we're going to be working on something like this that does require permits, I want the permits to be done. Now, you'll notice in some of these pictures that these guys had to dig pretty deep to get down to the pipe. In California, if you go more than 5 feet deep, you have to build shoring. You have to have shoring go up. So not exactly the complete depth that these guys went. Looking at the pictures, I would say it's longer than 5 feet, more than 5 feet deep. However, I did have an inspector that come out. They took a look at everything and they okayed everything. So whether it's required or not in this case, I'm going to assume not, because it was approved by the city inspector. All right. But I did want to show you guys the pictures of what takes place when you have your sewer line repiped from the house to the street, and kind of what to expect. You can either dig up the whole line and replace it, which would be very expensive, or you can do this lining, not even a lining, it's a new epoxy pipe, as they squeeze in the epoxy all the way down. And the inspector comes out and takes a look at the pipe and everything, and it was signed off. Anyway, I hope that you guys learned something new, something interesting. It was, like I said, about $7,200, $7,300 to have the whole thing repiped from the outside clean out to the street, to the main head, which is about 60 to 65 feet of piping. And that's in the state of California right now. That was just done a couple weeks ago. And I would say that was a pretty good price. So if you're looking to buy a house and they tell you the sewer line has collapsed or that there's an issue down there, it may be something where you can expect to spend somewhere between $7,500 and $12,000, $13,000, depending on the condition of the piping. If the clay has completely collapsed, you might not be able to get it unless they horizontally drill and bore the hole, but then they'd have to hit it just perfect onto the main head, which probably isn't going to happen, which means they'd have to dig up in the street. And that's, anytime you have to dig in the street, you got to get a special permit just for that. And it costs a lot of money to get that street put back together again. We're talking probably about $20,000, $25,000 total for the whole job, for what I had done. So that gives you a range. You might be able to get a steep discount on a property. You're just going to have to put in a little bit of headache. It wasn't a whole lot, honestly. I had to make sure that I didn't even have to have anybody home. They're able to go out, dig up the trench, as you'll see in the pictures, as you've seen in the pictures. They dug up their whole trench, replaced the pipe, tested it, put in the epoxy and all that. And it was over the matter of, I want to say, less than a week between the time I accepted their bid and the time I paid for the job done. Now, they did ask for 10% down. That is completely okay. When you have a contractor that's going to do a big job, they need to know that they're going to get some payment. So they will normally ask for at least some part of it. I've had some people in the past, some contractors that have asked up to 50% of the job. I don't like giving that much, but 10%, I was okay with that. You know, when I figured it was about $725, you know, if I was out anything, that's what I would be out. $725 is a lot easier to handle than, say, $3,600. Anyway, I hope that you found this informative. Please give me a thumbs up if you did like it, if you learned something. And if you have any questions about, or some things you weren't quite sure on what I explained, go ahead and ask down below and I'll be glad to answer your questions. This was done in, I don't know, probably about 20, 30 miles away from LA, just to give you an idea of the general area as far as the cost goes. But you're gonna have to talk to the people in your area to see what they charge. Now, I called probably about 10 people. I found them through Google. I found them through Zillow, or not Zillow, through Yelp. And yeah, so there were tons of repiping people. I think Home Advisor was one of the companies that I contacted. So about 3 or 4 websites that I went to. I did look at some of the company websites for these plumbers before they did the repiping. And I will tell you, spelling was not their strong suit. And if anything, that you'd kind of think that maybe that would delegitimize these people. In honesty, it didn't actually take much away, because I figure if as long as they're good mechanically, they don't have to know how to spell or create a website. And so I was more interested in knowing about their technique. I did have a guy that came to my house, to the property, and he said, I'm going to charge you $100 to run my camera. And I said, you know what? Then go home. I'm not going to pay for you to put your camera down in my pipe. You have come here. I've told you I wanted a free estimate. I've got about 12 people, and if you don't want to be one of them, get off my property. So he did. There was another one where he wanted the owner themselves to contact them to have them come out, and I said, nope, I am the property manager. I represent the owner. There's no need for you to have the owner involved in this. That's my job. That's why he hires me. So those are things to keep in mind if you're managing a property, whether it's yours or somebody else's. So anyway, I hope you had a good time, guys, and I'll see you next time.